Welcome to the Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts. We are your international headquarters for resources and ideas and insight in relation to the 9 elements of holistic wellness. Join us as we interview local and international wellness experts and learn how you can implement and improve one element or dimension of wellness at a time. Our experts will share their practical tips on wellness in one of these core areas: emotional, intellectual, occupational, physical, environmental, financial, spiritual, social, or habitual. We created our family of podcasts as a resource for anyone who is looking to integrate the 9 elements of holistic wellness into their daily lives. Welcome to the show. The Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts is proudly sponsored by the Global Wellness HQ community. It's an online membership group where we meet, we share ideas, we share insights, and we all work together and help one another discover our own personal wellness journeys. If you'd like to join us, you can easily click the link below or scan the QR code, and we love hearing your stories, so we hope to see you in the community. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to have a very exciting episode. We have Steve Spiro on with us, and Steve is the author of The Tao of a Master Connector. Steve, why don't you, first of all, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then I want your definition of Master Connector.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, it's a pleasure being on doing this with you. So Steve Spiro, the Master Connector, coming at you live and direct. I got to do that. This is part of my signature here, but a little bit about me. Born and raised in the Bronx, so a New Yorker, but now live in Connecticut. Shy and introverted, but I because my parents struggled financially. My dad did have a liquor store, but also struggled. Parents got divorced, so money was tight and was always driven. I always had a chip on my shoulder on the shorter side, so maybe Napoleon complex, but was introverted, but with a chip on my shoulder. So I was pretty motivated. Wound up getting into advertising and marketing, went to high school for that, which is where I met my wife, went to college for that, got out, couldn't get a job, start a company, opened a small advertising agency in New York City. And that was pretty wild being a 22-year-old businessman. And then parallel to that, started training the martial arts since 83. I hold a couple black belts. My wife's a black belt as well. And life's interesting in a household with 2 black belts, if you know what I mean. But anyway, had a karate studio for a while, which was a lot of fun. But so had a very illustrious career in advertising. And then eventually the economy shifted and I was out of work. But a year before that, I'd been introduced to a very successful entrepreneur who took me under his wing, got me on a path of self-development, books, audios, networking, and challenged me. He said, you should meet 3 strangers every day. And that sort of started to really open me up and maybe stretch me and got me out of my comfort zone. And, and when you're from New York, you talk to strangers, they're going to shoot you. They're going to kidnap you. It's just crazy. So, but I did it and started amassing a big network, eventually pivoted into technology, the consulting. And today I have the Master Connector show, which is we broadcast Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's been an amazing, incredible journey where, at this point on this recording, we're at we'll be on the 112th episode. I also, as you said, wrote a book and, I do speak engagements. That's the part. My mission on this planet is to be the light, uplift, inspire, and encourage. And my goal is to, travel the world, speak and inspire and be a beacon of light and sort of help people, inspire them to really get out of their comfort zone and be, be the best version that they could be and also pay it forward and continue to also be a light too. And so, when my thinking is as you take your candle and light somebody else's candle, you eventually, yours doesn't go out. And if everyone does that, then the world will be a brighter place.
I love that candle imagery, and I think that's very important. A lot of people seem to think, there's a scarcity mindset that if I give you an introduction, somehow I'm lesser for it. And I really do like that idea of lighting one candle with another candle, because that's what networking is. There's
Right.
more light for every introduction and every connection we make.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's so important. And I think that we, especially after COVID and in the midst of COVID, there was a lot of darkness and people were feeling depressed and isolated. And I was more connected than ever before because I was reaching out. Yeah, granted, I was not meeting strangers like I was for a while. But I was doing it through LinkedIn, and it's been amazing. And I've been able to have some incredible relationships and collaboration like with you, Jeff. So yeah, it's been a blessing.
And I think that's, what propelled me forward was when the world shut down and, I was told that networking was dead and that COVID was the end of networking. And somebody made the mistake of telling me, Jeff, you can't network on Zoom. And I said, I feel like you could. And so that was my mission, was to prove that you could. I like hearing from other connectors that you were reignited by COVID, and I think that's a powerful story. Let's talk about one thing. I have a tangent question I want to ask you. You mentioned that you're an introvert, and a lot of people tell me that us introverts can't network. I'd like to first of all hold you up and say I beg to differ. Um, what do you think your superpower is that being an introvert has brought to you as a networker?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few superpowers, but the one that I think is probably the biggest is I don't have a quit bone in my body. It's grit, it's persistence, and I also like a challenge. So yeah, I'm absolutely an introvert, and the reason I know it is because after day's over and I've been around a lot of people or I've been on a lot of Zoom calls, I am exhausted. I earn my pillow, right? Introverts, when you're around a lot of people, you're exhausted at the end of the day or afterwards. Whereas in extroverts, they're energized by being around people. So I definitely know I'm an introvert, but I do know that it's so important to do it. And we can, maybe depending upon how this conversation goes, I could talk about that. But yeah, so being persistent and not just allowing, and there's a part of me that just doesn't care. And I don't take that wrong. I don't mean I don't care about people. So to some degree, I don't care what they think, to a degree, and that because of that, I'm okay with doing things that maybe others might not do. And that's been reaching out and, like I said, meeting strangers. I was in Charlotte. I met a whole bunch of cool people. Now Charlotte, when you're in the South, it's a lot easier to talk to people because, like after you speak to them for 5 minutes, they're like, "Hey, you should come over for dinner tonight." That doesn't happen in New York. But anyway, it's just I think it's persistence, it's grit, it's not caring, and not, again, not only not caring about people. Yeah,
I think the word I would say is not bothered by. I think the
sure.
great networkers I know show up because we know who we are, and
Yeah.
this is who we are. Like it or leave it, we're okay either way. So how would you describe, and by the way, we're going totally off the grid here because I have my prepackaged questions and I don't think they serve my audience with you. How would you describe a master connector? What do you think what does a master connector mean to you?
Thought I was going to get off the hook on that one. No, holding me to the fire on that one. That's good. It's okay. Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So master connector, there's a lot of things in that. There's a lot of started the recording on, on sort of word plays and all that. But so for me, number one, I didn't want to be called a master networker because for a lot of people, especially the younger generation, networking is a dirty word. It's like prostitution. It's just people look, it doesn't feel right. So connecting is better. But truth be told, it is much more real and it's much more powerful when you're a master connector. You're connecting. So connection for me is connecting authentically, being, leading with my vulnerabilities, leading with your weaknesses. It breaks walls down, breaks barriers down. I love speaking about those things, and I wasn't always comfortable with it. There was a lot of self-discovery and there was a lot of growth and a lot of things I had to work through before I became comfortable in my own skin. But so connecting authentically, sort of being others focused, being that go-giver is another part. Those are two of the four pillars that I speak about when I'm asked to speak and keynote, but also it's two of the four pillars of my book. And so there's that piece, right? It's connecting. And being connecting the dots and helping other people by making introductions or perhaps connecting them to other things that you're doing, networking groups or podcasts you know about, or books that you've read that you could give, connect them and add value that way. So there's that piece of it, right? There's also spiritual, right? I have a very strong spiritual and faith, and connecting somebody with their higher power, or with something that is bigger than themselves. There's that piece of it, right? Then the pun, obviously, and you can see the cover of my book here if you're looking at the video, but there's a black belt there, right? So connecting. There's also that kind of pun of connection, and hitting somebody in the face, right? Connection, right? But also there's the master part, because I'm a double black belt. I have a 4th degree in Goju Karate and a 1st degree in Jujitsu. So master, there's that pun there as well, right? And when you're at a high level in the martial arts, you're referred to as a master. So there's a lot of different things in the master connector. But because I've always had so many things going on, and I'm not a box kind of guy, it's hard to put me in a box. He's an attorney, she's a CPA, he's a plumber. That I don't fit in a box like that. So when people ask me what I do, and I would tell them, I just call me the master connector. And that's just, kind of just keep it simple. Because when I try to tell them all the things I do, their head starts spinning. So just call me the master connector. So that's a short version of the answer.
I love it. And by the way, I love the layers to the answer as well, because again, that's one of the things I find about really good connectors is that they have a fascinating story of self-discovery. And I want to stress that networking and connecting, it's not something you wake up one day and decide I'm a master at. It's something that you've intentionally focused on. And that's what I like about having met Steve, and surprise, surprise, Steve and I met through networking and connecting.
Right.
Let's talk about relationships, because this is the one I'm hearing the biggest difference in a lot of the younger networkers I'm meeting. It's very much transactional. They're looking for, if you don't have a client for me, what use are you? Tell me your beliefs around the word relationship, because to me, I don't know why I'd want to network if it wasn't to build relationships. But I want to hear your take on that, and even if you challenge me on the definition, um, thoughts on
I'm going to challenge
relationships.
you, Jeff, but I'll challenge what people are maybe saying to you about, if you don't have business for me, then I don't want to have a relationship with you. I hear that a lot, right? I'm big on LinkedIn. I think I'm at like 25,000 connections and so forth. And, it just continues to grow. And, my rule of thumb is, if you're bothering to connect with me, I want to get on a call with you. I want to know more about you. And I want for us to tell each other our stories. And, you get pushback every now and then, well, why do I need to do that? And I don't get it. And for a lot of the younger generation, it's, social media and networking and connection is just another name or number or contact or follower on social media, but that's not true connection. So to further elaborate on your question, so I also believe that, number one, you may not be somebody who I would be doing business with today, but maybe down the line you will. And if there's a relationship and I could start to understand your needs, wants, and desires, maybe I can help you. And whether it be through my services or maybe through someone I know in my network. First of all, I really believe in the law of reciprocity. You sow and then eventually you reap. So I'm a big go-giver, believe in giving first, and then eventually you get. Maybe you don't get exactly where you sow, but you're going to get it. The universe works that way. So that's number one. But the other part of it is, who do you know, right? So everyone knows these days more than 1,000 people when you count social media. So perhaps you may not be a client, or the person you're thinking about connecting, you're saying, no, you're not a potential client, so I don't want to talk to you. Yeah, but what about maybe 25 of their connections? Once you get to know them and there's a trust established, maybe they want to refer you. Who knows? So don't always think about that person. I learned that years ago. I remember again, I hate saying the word, but networking. I was at a very up. It was in Greenwich. I'll just say it like that. And so a lot of wealth in Greenwich, Connecticut, and the one of the guys, I'll just use his first name in case he hears this podcast. I don't want him to be offended, but his name is Freddie, and blue collar guy. He was a construction guy and dropping the F-bomb every 3 seconds, right? You would say, oh, he would be why would I connect with him? Because he's never going to be a client of mine. There's nothing that he can help me with. But you know what? He was the best referral source I've ever had. And that was because he was in the construction industry and he was extremely well connected with a bunch of very high net worth people in Greenwich, Connecticut. He grew up in Greenwich. So don't judge a book by its cover, and don't prejudge and say, well, they're not going to be a client, then I'm not going to connect with them. I think that's very short-sighted.
I love it, and I think there's a lot of paths we can go. What are some of your tips, if I may? And again, don't give away the whole book, but a lot of people I hear, and this is the path Jeff's on right now. A lot of people say, "I don't know how to build relationship. I don't know how to connect." What are some of the ways you start to connect with human beings?
Yeah. By the way, the book, although it does have some tips, the Tao, meaning the way of or path, is more of a mindset book than it is a how-to book on networking and connecting. There is some really good value in there, and there's definitely going to be some things that people will help understand on how to be a better connector and networker. But I want to just set the record on that. But to answer your question, first thing is if you could break down barriers, and the best way to break down barriers is tell stories. And what I find, and again, whether it's meeting somebody strange on the street, I don't mean they're a strange person, but just somebody who you never met before, a stranger, right? If you could kind of get them talking and maybe share a little bit, but get them in, and they get to know that you truly care and want to know them. That helps. If you're able to get to a point where there's at least enough intrigue and trust, and this is the magic move where you could jump on a Zoom call, or if they're local, go for coffee, then tell each other your stories. And in telling your story, ditch the pitch, right? Stop the pitch slapping. That's with a P, okay? Stop the pitch slapping. Don't pitch. Talk about your story. And when people say, hey, so what do you do? If this is a connect call or connect coffee, I'm going to be like, can we do something a little different? Can we not go down the what do you do route and do the what do you do dance? Could we just maybe tell each other our stories? Because I think it's a better way to connect, and it's a way that the kids inside of us could kind of play in the sandbox, together, because people do business with people like and trust. If you start with the business stuff right away, people's walls go up because again they're thinking, oh, okay. But when you start to get to know each other, then there starts to be a bond. Barriers are down, balls go down, barriers are broken, and now you really start to connect, and a relationship could be formed. So that's my short perspective of that.
I love it. And it's a funny thing because a few people lately I'm seeing in my feed, there's a lot of salespeople and marketing people who are debating and trying to debunk the know, like, and trust factor. And I've heard a lot of people say, oh, they misquote Bob Berg, who says, all things being equal, we do business with people we know, like, and trust. And our job as good networkers is for things to not be equal. We want it to be an unfair advantage. And I think one of the things I do, which I suspect you do as well, I give introductions, I bring people together. And then once they've seen that that's where my heart is, then I get great introductions and I meet amazing humans like yourself. What would you say to somebody who said no, like, and trust is a myth?
Well, listen, you could argue laws are universal, right? There's the law of electricity. You can argue that electricity doesn't kill you if you could put a. I don't suggest doing this, but if you don't believe it, you could put a hair dryer in a water in the bath and decide to step in it and see if you don't get electrocuted, or you could jump off a building and say, I don't believe in the law of gravity, and just say, I'm going to jump off and I know I'm going to go up, not down. You could dispute the laws, the universal laws, but they're true. Truth is truth. So no, listen, for centuries, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. It's just the way it is. And you may get lucky here or there, right? some timing stuff, but in general, if you want to have repeat business, you want to have the Go Giver book was originally called Endless Referrals, right? If you want to have endless referrals, you need to really get to know people, and they need to get to know you and like you and trust you.
I love that. And by the way, the people who tell me no, like, and trust doesn't work, they're usually using cold calling as their primary method of growth.
Yeah.
So
Trying to rationalize what they do.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a numbers game. I hear all of those myths, and I actually sat down. I'm a recovering accountant, so I actually did the math on referrals versus cold calling, and you're not even playing the same game. Like a good referral on a bad day, you're going to close 80%. Good cold calling on a great day, you're lucky to close 20%.
If that, yeah.
If yeah, extremely lucky. Like you'll win awards if you close 20% of cold traffic.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't want to rely on my business growing based on record-setting days that I have zero control over, other than it's a numbers game. Just keep dialing. I like know, like, and trust. It works for me. And for the record, people who really object to know, like, and trust, I can say with certainty we're probably not going to do business together.
Yeah. And in the world that we're like overly and bombarded, there's robocalls, so many robocalls now. The inbox, my inbox on LinkedIn is constantly bombarded with pitches. So there's just we're tired of it. So if you want to break through the clutter, try just know, liking, and trusting, getting to know, having people know, like, and trust you through true connection.
Yeah, I love it. Now you have your podcast. What was
Yep.
the origin story of the podcast? What was Steve doing the day he said, "I'm going to create this podcast"?
It wasn't a one day thing, but I'll give you the story. So, I've been on LinkedIn. I think my LinkedIn journey may have started in '08. And, at one point I said, I'm going to be the PMA guy. I'm going to put out good, positive posts and get, good vibes out, and positive messages. And so for quite a while, I was putting out just written visual posts. And then a good friend of mine that I saw he was doing some stuff on LinkedIn. We connected, and he said, you should think about video. And, he said, if you want to show the world you could speak, because obviously he was looking to become a speaker. He's like, you should think about video and show that you could speak. And I took him up on the challenge and dove in face first and started doing some video series, and that was fun. And that definitely helped stretch me for sure. But then the middle of the pandemic, we saw a lot of live streaming going on. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn Live was happening as well. And found out at that point there was a strict approval process and application, not so much anymore. But I reached out to my network, and I had been on a gentleman named Cameron Toth, who turns out now is my co-host with the podcast, the LinkedIn Live show, and the Master Connector show. But anyway, I reached out to him because he had I'd been on a show that was called BizDev Live, and I was impressed. It was network TV production quality. I was really, really blown away by what he was doing. And I told him my dilemma about getting approved and feeling completely over my head. He said, dude, I've been trying to get on LinkedIn Live for 2 years. We should collaborate. And I don't think it was that long. I think it was maybe a few weeks or a month. And we had our first, live broadcast, and we broadcast now across LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And then we also have it, we're a little behind schedule, but it's also being, dumped into Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. But it's a live broadcast, and we enjoy the excitement of being live. It's crazy.
I love live because I am not one of those people to rehearse and be able to put the same level of energy. I used to do speaking, and I'd go practice on the empty stage, and my energy level would match the room. It's like the energy for me comes from the people, but like you, afterwards it's like, and then I'm done. The introvert in me left the building. You might still see me there, but don't talk to me because I'm just a shell of the person. So you've been 112 episodes and counting. What's been your biggest lesson along the way about, because Here's a fascinating thing I'm discovering, and I want to hear your take on this because it might be one of those Captain Obvious. I'm finding the really good podcasters, the ones who are curious and they want to interview people, they tend to be really good connectors because they're curious. What was the most interesting thing that you've learned along the way from your 112 episodes?
Yeah, I don't know how if I can answer that directly, but I will say this, that I have a call with each person that is going to be on my on my show. We do a 20 to 30-minute call, and I want to make sure we're on the same page. It's not like you get a link if somebody wants to be on the show or I want to have them on the show, I send them a link and then they're on my show, and the first time I'm speaking to them is on that podcast or the show. I don't like doing that. I like really connecting, and I want to make sure that our values line up and they fit the core values of our show. We have 4 pillars of our show. I mentioned what they are. Well, 2 of them. The others are being, having the grit to overcome obstacles, and then having, building community and grow connections. Besides the connecting authentically and the being others focused. So I want to make sure that they feel that there's a real connection. And so when I get on, I know that it's going to be a good conversation because we line up. A lot of times there's when I get on podcasts, a lot of times it feels sort of generic. And so, and you and I had a connect call, so obviously it's not applying here, but that's the part that I think is really, it's along the lines of know, like, and trust, right? You're on with somebody that you like, and so it's a good conversation.
I think that's the right word. It's the conversation because I can do a podcast and I have done some where it's very technical and it's very formulaic, feature, feature, feature. It doesn't change lives when people know, and there are some people out there who teach that formula. I like to mix it up a little because who has a scripted conversation? I mean, I liken networking to finding your spouse. It gets a little dry if you have a list of 10 questions and you ask, I clearly wouldn't do well at speed dating because after the end, I'd be like, I can't remember. They're all the same. But a good conversation, you remember that long after that conversation has passed.
100%. And listen, I have had some conversations that were on the drier side. I've learned some things from that, and I've been, energy, and if you're getting the sort of short, curt, one-word answers on the initial call, it's going to be similar on the podcast, where you're going to have to pull it out of them, and that's a tough broadcast when you're trying to pull it out of them. But yeah, so some really interesting lessons. But I agree with you. Conversation is really a big part of true connection.
And I think I tell people, there's nobody more interested in your story other than yourself than me at the time of the podcast. And if you're bored by your story, guess what? And I've had a few people where they're clearly bored with their story, and I shut the recording off and say, maybe you need to revisit your story because you're boring yourself. I can tell. Um, Now, I'm not going to ask you to pick favorites. My gut, I want to know who your favorite guest is, but that feels a little mean. Um, who was your most unexpected guest?
Oh man, yeah. I don't.
You've only got 112 episodes, so I don't expect a top of the mind answer. But
I mean, the one that stands out is when we had Dr. Dre on. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't, I mean, the guy, MTV Cribs, that the rap culture can be a little raw and raunchy. So I really wasn't sure what to expect. And he was really good. I mean, he's got a crazy story. And there's 2 versions, there's 2 Dr. Dre's I learned. One is the West Coast Dr. Dre, spelled differently from the East Coast Dr. Dre. Apparently in the
really,
rap culture, that's normal to have similar names or whatever. I didn't know that. I found that out. But the Dr. Dre that I spoke, interviewed on our show was from the East Coast, and he had struggled with obesity and was, dealing with diabetes, and but had a very strong spiritual side to him, and just a great heart to want to help people and get that message out about obesity and diabetes. And so it was a really, really, really good conversation. He was also legally blind, so we had to stream it through Zoom, and StreamYard doesn't like Zoom, and it's just not, they're not compatible, but we made it work, and it was a great episode and great content, and it was cool to be able to have that interaction with him.
Well, and I just like to point out that it takes a very special host to create that environment where that kind of vulnerability comes out. Because I think a lot of people, they'll show up and say, "Here's the 10 questions I'm willing to answer." It's nice to hear, and I had no idea there was two sides to Dr. Dre, and two personalities, if you will. So,
Two real people. One's pretty fit and the other one wasn't. Yeah. And
wow.
they're not, they're not like, dual personalities. It's two totally different people. One was spelled Dr. DR, and I can't even remember now at this point which one. And one is DR for doctor, one spells out doctor, one has Dre with an accent mark over the E, and the other one doesn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny. I want to come back to your book for a minute. That you talk about the mindset. I'm not kidding, Steve. I can't script this stuff. Literally, I was just on a call with somebody and I said, the basic beginner at anything, and I was talking about martial arts and taekwondo. The white belt is about basically learning the skills so that you don't hurt yourself, you don't get hurt, you don't hurt others. And then as you grow, you start to learn to use the gear to get better. And then by the time you get to the black belt, it's the mindset. So I got chills when you said your book's more about the mindset. Um, because that's one of the things I'm really, really passionate about, is helping people who aren't necessarily connectors. So what advice would you have to somebody who's just brand new? They're looking at, maybe they've dabbled in networking, as we're going to call it, and they want to become more of a connector. What advice would you give to that human being?
Yeah, just go out and not be self-focused, be others focused. Be if you can, just go out, have fun, and really be interested, genuinely interested in learning about the other person and seeing how you can be a blessing to them. If you do that, people will respond, they'll open up, they'll want to speak with you. Being a shy and introvert person, I I had a tough time for a long time keeping conversation going or being a conversationalist because I felt like I needed to be very smart. I'm 3 credits shy of my degree in my from for college, and I went to art school, art high school, art college because I wasn't super studious. I wasn't, very, because maybe my learning disability, reading was not something that came natural to me. It was really hard to do. So I didn't have a lot of knowledge, if you will. Now today I've listened to multiple books, and I could use a lot of that stuff. Just comes out of my head now. But regardless, the better conversations are ones that you ask questions about the other person, and when they tell you they're interested in pickleball, that's the big craze right now. Ask them, well, what got you into pickleball, and if you don't even know anything about pickleball, can you tell me about the game? I've hearing a lot about it. Tell me, and you could, keep a conversation going a long, long time by just asking questions, genuinely interested in other people, in what they're interested in, and just get them talking. And it's so easy and normal to connect and to network when you're others focused, and be looking to add value and make people feel good. And honestly, I want people feeling better after I met them. I want them to feel like, hey, my life is better because I met this guy, Steve. And maybe not because I gave them information, but maybe they just feel better about themselves. And that's it.
I love that other focused, and it's clear that you've been impacted by Bob Berg. I think that's one of the things you and I have bonded over is endless referrals. And now with John David Mann with the Go Giver series, how can people get to know you? How can they step into your world and start to get to know you a little better, and decide if you're somebody they want to collaborate with, play along with, just connect with?
Sure. So easiest way is I'm on LinkedIn. If you type in stevespiro.com or dial stevespiro.com and you're going to get my digital business card, and there's a whole bunch of links on there. LinkedIn is really where I live. I may have an Instagram page or a Facebook page or what other Twitter page, but I don't get on there. LinkedIn is where I live. So find me on LinkedIn, Steve Spiro. I'm usually the first one. I think I'm the first one that pops up when anyone searches me. So that, or go to stevespiro.com. I'd love if you do connect with me. I'm going to warn you right now, you're going to get a message saying, let's jump on a call. So be ready for that. But that's, to me, the best way to start a relationship, and to start to see if we want to play in the sandbox together, and start to get to know each other. And I think that's truly what this world is about. Yeah. For years I was very isolated and self-focused and me-focused. And the more I connected with people, the better I felt about myself, and the less isolated I honestly felt. So yeah, I'd love to connect with you if you're listening to this, and let's play in the sandbox.
I love it. Well, Steve, from my heart to yours, my world is better having met you. So I want to thank you for
Same here.
taking some time and hanging out with me today.
I appreciate it very much, Jeff. This was an honor. Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity to connect with you, and give me exposure to some of the folks in your world and your life, and very much value and appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to either click the link below or scan the QR code to register and listen to other episodes of our podcast. Or if you think your business or you would be a great guest to be on our show, we're always looking for experts in one of the 9 elements of holistic wellness. We'd love to have you. You can either click the link below, or you can scan the QR code and complete our speaker intake form. Thank you, and to your wellness.